Puppy mill dogs can present their adopters with unique challenges because of the conditions in which they were raised. You wouldn't know it by looking at Daisy today, but she spent the first 3 years of her life in a puppy mill where she was born, raised, and used as a breeding dog. Puppy mills are mass breeding facilities that turn out puppies for profit. They're regulated by the USDA, but are still infamously filthy, overcrowded, and unhealthy. Many of the dogs found in puppy mills suffer from malnutrition, exposure, or from congenital defects caused by inbreeding. These kennels are small and they're made of wood or wire, and there's no bottom in these kennels except for the actual wire, and that causes sometimes for the dog's legs to go down and get caught or injured, and the feet can be deformed over time. Female dogs kept for breeding are called brood bitches. This is what Daisy was. Dogs that are born and raised in such an environment do not experience proper socialization with other dogs or humans. A lot of people wonder, aren't there laws to protect these dogs? And are there ways to rehabilitate these dogs once they're adopted? Well, let's talk about the law first. The Animal Welfare Act is the law as it applies to puppy mills. Puppy mills are regulated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture under that Animal Welfare Act, also called the AWA. This was passed by Congress in 1966, which is going to be 50 years old next year. So it's obviously time to update this law. The AWA established minimum standards of care for animals bred for commercial use and sale. The AWA minimum standards for care fall far short of what most people would consider ideal, and the USDA themselves agree with that. The Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, also known as APHIS, came out with a document called the AWA Fact Sheet. An actual quote from that AWA Fact Sheet states, and I quote, "Individuals who operate facilities in these categories must provide their animals with adequate care in the areas of housing, handling, sanitation, nutrition, water, veterinary care, and protection from extreme weather and temperatures. Although federal requirements establish acceptable standards, they are not ideal." And again, that's a direct quote from the APHIS AWA fact sheet. Inspectors for APHIS under the USDA are responsible for inspecting and regulating thousands of puppy mills, research facilities, zoos, and circuses every year. Because they're so understaffed and their authority is limited to the inadequate AWA, inspections are inconsistent and anti-cruelty laws are rarely enforced in these rural settings. Even when violations are found, puppy mill operators are allowed to remain open while they rectify them. In certain cases, repeat offenders don't even allow the inspectors access to the property to do the inspections. These kennels sometimes even remain licensed despite this non-compliance. And it makes you wonder, what are these offenders hiding? Well, in the case of Daisy, like I mentioned before, she was a brood bitch. So the offenders would have been hiding the fact that she was never groomed, and if she did ever get a bath, it was basically an accident because, she was kept in the cage while it was being power washed. She received little veterinary care, despite the fact that she was kept continually pregnant. Her puppies were taken from her, before they could be properly weaned, usually at the age of 6 weeks. This results in some of them not knowing how to properly eat, and they would subsequently starve to death. Had Daisy not been rescued, unfortunately, she would have been killed at age 6 or 7 when she was no longer able to breed. Now, with physical health problems, obviously it's easy to combat those with a trip to the vet. Unfortunately, these behavioral disorders present in some of these puppy mill dogs, obviously it takes more than a trip to the vet to alleviate those. Almost all puppy mill dogs will exhibit fearful behavior and lack of socialization because they were taken from their mothers again, usually around 6 weeks of age. The first months of a puppy's life are very important as far as socialization, and because they're taken at that age, this almost always creates extreme shyness, aggression, fear, and or anxiety. But it's possible to help a dog overcome these issues. The first thing to do is give the dog respect, to always talk in soothing, calm tones. Give the dog plenty of time to acclimate to their new settings, and remember that they may mark their territory or may urinate out of anxiety when they're frightened. And just remember those are unconscious or involuntary actions. Make sure that he or she has their own space where they feel safe and comfortable. Typically, crates are ideal for this. Sometimes it's helpful for the dog to be around other dogs. In the case of Daisy, we had 2 other dogs of the same breed when we brought her home, and so that helped her. That also helped, I think, the other 2 dogs. They socialized very well together. If your dog acts extremely shy or scared around certain people, you can ask those individuals maybe to feed the dog a treat as they're interacting. That often helps to alleviate some of the nervousness. If you find your dog only wants attention from you, you may be forced to ignore your dog in order to kind of force them to interact with others. Separation anxiety can be helped by teaching your dog to interact with others, ensuring that they don't become too dependent upon you. Taking your dog for walks in dog parks is another way to help them see that the way other dogs interact with humans, and they can actually begin to see that some humans are actually worth their trust. In conclusion, I hope you've learned some things about how to overcome behavioral issues in puppy mill dogs. After having Daisy for over 2 years now, I can tell you that it wasn't always easy at first. She would avoid all eye contact. She would actually run when we entered the room despite our best intentions. But now she runs up to us and she sleeps with us in the bed every night. And all she wants now is to be pressed up next to us on the couch and watch TV. It all ultimately comes down to love and a lot of patience. And I hope you've also taken away from this how horrible puppy mills can be. Thanks.